We are beginning tonight's Shiur in Siman Kuf Nun Gimel. We left off in the middle of Ches. We are in the last three words of page 74. We discussed in the beginning of Ches that Banu Bais Stam v'Kedishu achar kach lebeis Haknesses. If either a person built a house Stam and then was makdash it to be a Beis Haknesses, it gets the din of the Beis Haknesses, but it's not having its proper kedusha until they daven there. And then the Mechaber said, "Afilu in banuhu l'shem Beis Haknesses." So whether it was built mitchila as a shul or it was built as a house and donated as a shul, either way, it does not get the kedusha of a regular Beis Haknesses ad she'yispalu bo, until they daven in it. That's what we discussed last night. Now the Mechaber picks up in the third to last order 74 and he says, "V'kevan she'hispalu bo afilu orachim lifi sha'a." And once it is davened in, even if it's davened one time by guests, kevan shehaya miyuchad tefillah, since it was designated and it was mazuman for tefillah, kadosh, then it has the full kedusha of a Beis Haknesses. So that's what we discussed last time, that even though Hazmana is lav milsahi, but once you daven in it one time, it gets the kedusha. So the Mechaber is saying here, even if it's only guessed that daven lefi sha'a, that gives it the kedusha because it was miyuchad as a makom l'tefillah. And the Mechaber ends off the sif and says, "V'im lefi sha'a hikdishu," and if it was only mukdash lefi sha'a, we'll see exactly what that means in the Mishna Berura. Sa'akol kafi masha amru. So then everything goes based on their stipulation on what they said exactly. We'll see the details shortly. So it begins the Mishna Berura. We are up to Sifkota Nun Aleph, the second line on page Lamed Ches. So we said once the orachim daven there even lefi sha'a, since it was miyuchal tefillah, it gets the kedusha. Ratzalomer means to say hazmana haisa hazmana ma'ula. This designation that was made was a regular, proper designation. Shehizman osa la'olam lehispalelbo. It was designated to be a place to daven there forever. Ubameh di'isa ukema di'isa le'el b'sim membeis. Similar to what we learned earlier in Hilchos Tefillin and Sim membeis, the heicha di'azmene l'sudur la'olam l'meitza beit tefillin. Once you designated a sudar, a kerchief, to wrap in a tefillin on a permanent basis, that was what your plan was for this sudar. V'tzarbe afilu pam echad, and you wrapped the tefillin in it even one time, that gets the kedusha, and shuv asr l'meitza bezuzi. You're no longer allowed to wrap in that sudar money. So the same idea over here, once you have a proper azmana and you use it one time, it gets the full kedusha. Just like by the sudar, you were mazmin it to be for your tefillin. Once you wrap your tefillin at one time, you can't wrap money in it. Here also, once you designate it for permanent use as a Beis Haknesses, even if it's only davened in one time, it gets the kedusha of a Beis Haknesses. This is coming to exclude if you were mazmin it to be a makom or tefillah only temporarily. You only said it's going to be a shul until the regal passes or until the fair passes. That's a time when a lot of people gather. So you want it to be used as a shul temporarily until the fair ends, until the yontif ends. Then the din is lo chashiva hazmana klal. That's not called a hazmana. Umutar afilu be'es haregel le'achov lishtos bo. And even during the regel or during the yirid, which was the time that you were mazmin it for, the hazmana is not chal, and therefore you're allowed to eat and drink even during that time when you're using it for davening. So that is how the Mishna Berura is explaining over here, that if you were hizmin osa rak lefi sha'a, that should not be confused with what we're going to see in the Mishna Berura right now, which is explaining the Mechaber. The Mechaber ended off and said, "V'im lefi sha'a kedishu." If you were makdish the house to be a Beis Haknesses only lefi sha'a, so akol lefi masha amaru. Then everything goes by what you said. Explains the Mishna Berura in Nun Bais. Hainu sha'omar stam. What it means to say over here is not like we just ended off with the Mishna Berura, that you only said during the time of this regel or this yirid, it should have the designation of a Beis Haknesses. Rather, what's going on in the Mechaber is that you said stam, ani mazmin osa l'regolim. It was a permanent designation for only certain periods. You said for Yom Tovim, this is designated as a Beis Haknesses. The mashma lashon, that lashon is mashma b'chol she'yeh regel. Anytime there'll be a regel, this is going to be the Beis Haknesses. Al kein chashuva hazmana olamis. that's called a permanent designation. Al kol panim al oso hazman. At least for that time. It's a permanent designation for the regalim that it's going to be considered a shul. Va'osr bezeh hazman, and therefore during those times it gets a din of a Bais Haknesses, and once it's davened in one time, it has the kedusha, and you will not be allowed to eat and drink there, and it will follow all the rules of kedusha's Bais Haknesses. Ustam hazmana lefi sha'a. But if it was just stama hazmana lefi sha'a, you said till this regel is over, till this fair is over, kvar kosa bebeis Yosef b'shem ha-Mordechai lo chashiva hazmana klal. The Beis Yosef already told us b'shem ha-Mordechai. That's not called a hazmana at all. U'kumoshe kasadnu mitfila, like we wrote at the end of Sivkoton Nun Aleph. U'le'inyan t'nai ayin la'el simin kuf Nun Aleph Sif Yud Aleph Mishnah Berura Sham. In terms of making a t'nai on the kedusha being chal in the Bais Haknesses, that we discussed earlier in kuf Nun Aleph Sif Yud Aleph. Just to summarize what we're pointing out over here in the Mishnah Berura, the case of the Mechaber, the main case was you were mazmin this makom to be a makom for tefillah permanently. So once you davened it at one time, it gets the full kedusha of the Bais Haknesses. If you're only being mazmin it for lefi sha'ah, so we had two ways of doing it lefi sha'ah. The proper way to do lefi sha'ah, as the Mishnah Berura discusses in explanation of the Mechaber, is that you said it's going to be a permanent designation as a Bais Haknesses for every regel. So then it goes like whatever you said, it's a designation forever, it's permanent, but it's only for the regalim, so it's chal on the regalim. As opposed to a case where you just say for the rest of this regel, or till the end of the fair, that's not called a hazman at all, and even during that tkufa when you're davening in the Bais Haknesses, you would be allowed to eat and drink there. It does not get a din of Kedushas Bais Haknesses. Now we begin the Mechaber in Siftes. Kishemochrin anshe hakfar Bais Haknesses. Now we discussed already earlier that the people of a village are allowed to sell the Bais Haknesses in their kfar. Ukishemochrin anshe hakfar Bais Haknesses yicholim lemochro mimkar olam. They're allowed to sell it as a permanent sale. V'halokeach yasav u'mashe yirtza. And the one who buys the shul from them can do with it whatever he wants. Chutz mimerchatz ubursaki ubeis tfilu ubeis akisei. There are 4 exceptions. If a person buys a Bais Haknesses, he's not allowed to use it not to be a bathhouse, not to be a tannery, not to be a place of a mikvah, not to be a Beis Hakisei. Those are more of a bizayon, and therefore those are off limits. But anything else that he wants to use, the makom that was a Bais Haknesses that he bought, he is allowed to use it for that. That's if stam the members of the city are selling the Bais Haknesses. But if the sale is being done in the better way, by the Shiva Tuvei Ha'ir with the Maimed Anshe Ha'ir, so then Yasah Lokeach Afilu Elu Arba Advarim. Then the one who buys it can even do these 4 activities, these 4 places, which are more of a Makam Bizayon, even that will be permissible. So again, the Mechaber says that when the people of a village are selling their Bais Haknesses, which they are allowed to do, they can sell it as a permanent sale, and the buyer can do whatever he wants, except for those 4 things that are considered a greater bizayon than other things. But if it was sold by the Zayin Tuvei Ha'ir, the Maimed Anshe Ha'ir, then they could even use it for one of those 4 things. Says the Mishnah Berura Sivkota Nun Gimel. So the Anshe Akfar seller Bais Haknesses, V'hu adin b'shel krachim kishetolu b'shas habinyan b'das yochid. This is not a halacha that is limited to the people of a village. That's just a place where in general the people of the village are allowed to sell their shul. But the same din applies, says the Mishnah Berura, if it's a bigger city, but they were tola the binyan at the time of the building of this Bais Haknesses, they were tola on das of a yochid. Hamavur le'el besos of Zion, we said the power is given over to him that he's allowed to sell it. So any shul that's allowed to be sold, whether the case of the Mechaber, it's a case where the Anshe Akfar is selling it, or like the Mishnah Berura adds on, it could be a shul of a krach, but they gave it over to a yachid, and that yachid has the rights to sell it. Either way, in those 2 cases, it could be sold as a mimkar olam, as a permanent sale, of kotan and dalid. Kevan she'anshe ha'ir, o tuvei ha'ir maskir lam b'chira. Since we have either the members of the city, or we have the zayin tuvei ha'ir that are masking for the sale, it is a good sale, ukid l'el b'siv zayin, like we saw in siv zayin. Of course, we saw the limitation over there, that if it's only one or the other, the money cannot be used for anything that's not a raising of Kedusha. If it was done through both, the Zayin Tuvei Ha'ir with the Maimed Anshe Ha'ir, then you could do with the money whatever you want. So the halacha over here, when you only have one of the groups, either you have the Anshe Ha'ir or the Zayin Tuvei Ha'ir, then it could be a permanent sale, but the buyer cannot use it for these 4 things. If Katan Nun Hey. Shekol elu heim tashmishim megunim ma'od. These things are all uses that are very disgraceful. Va'osar la'asosan b'mokum shahaya Bais Haknesses. And you're not allowed to make a place that used to be a Bais Haknesses into one of these four places. Va'afilu im nofal habinyan b'mokum ahu. Even if the structure of the building fell down in that place, v'nisha raktel ba'alman, all you have left is a little mound. Osir l'ishtamei sham be'elu ha'arba dvarim. You're not allowed to use over there for these four things. V'chein osir l'zra b'makom ahu. It's not limited to those four things. You're also not allowed to plant there if the building collapsed. Shekol zehu genai l'makom shayam b'tchila Bais Haknesses. All this is considered a disgrace to the place that was once a Bais Haknesses. If you look in the Sha'ar Tzion on Os Nun Gimel, he writes, on that which the Mishna Berura started off and said, "Shekol eluhem tashmishim megunim ma'od va'asar la'asosam b'makom shaya Bais Haknesses." Hainu afshe mehadomim kana Bais Haknesses acher o Sefer Torah. Even if from the money that they received, they bought another Bais Haknesses or they bought a Sefer Torah, it doesn't matter. The area that was sold as a Bais Haknesses is now to be used for one of these four things. Now, if you look at note number 71, we'll start from the second to last paragraph. Are you allowed to sell a place that's a shul to be used for a Beis Tifla for the Goyim to be a church? So, Kosa B'Shan Shuvas Yisrosa, Moshe writes, U'B'Shan Shuvas Minchas Yitzchak, Shechoshev Hadavar Keshimush Shel Bizayon, that also is considered a Shimush Shel Bizayon. V'harei zeh Gnai Gadol Yoser Ma'arba Dvarim Elu. It's actually a bigger Bizayon than the four things mentioned in the Chaber. U'Lemochor L'Nochri, to sell it to a Goyistam, the Minchas Yitzchak writes, B'Sheina Marsham Sheish L'Hatir, that you could be matir, because you don't know what he's going to use it for. But B'Shem Shal Shuvas Imre Yosher, Lesser. He says, "Nabi Asam Mishum Sheish Lochu Shem Yasem Menu Hanochri Beis Tifla." You have to be worried over there. If you sell it to a guy, very likely the guy is going to use that makom that was a Bais Haknesses as a Beis Tifla. And the end of note 71 he points out, "V'livnos b'makom she'omad bo Beis Knesses binyan diros o misradim." If you want to build in a place where the shul was apartments or an office building, sheyia bo gam beis kisei l'TorahAnytime. Obviously, if you're building an apartment building or an office building, there are going to be beis hakiseis that have to be there for living purposes. So Rav Yashiv writes, she'ein iser badavar, that is not forbidden. Even though he listed beis hakisei as one of the things that you can't make a makom that was a shul into, over here it's not a problem. Why? Says Rav Yashiv, ein iser badavar. You're not making the place that was the Bais Haknesses into a Bais Hakisei. That's not what you're doing. You're making it an apartment building that has different uses. He just adds on specifically our Bais Hakisei. It's not so pashut. It has a din of a Bais Hakisei from the times of Chazal, as we discussed previously. Since when you flush, the tzoya goes out right away. So there's many poskim that say that maybe it doesn't have a din of a regular Bais Hakisei, rather a Bais Hakisei de Parsoi. But either way, Rav Yashiv does say that to build an apartment building there or an office building there, even though it has a Bais Hakisei within the building, that's tam the regular tashmishim of the Beis Dira, and therefore that would not be a problem. Sivkoton Nun Vav is going on that which the Mechaber said, although we're limited that you can't make the Beis Hakisei that was sold in one of those four things that are Makom Bizayon, but if it was sold by the Shiva Tovei Ha'ir, B'mayim Anshe Ha'ir, if it was both together, not like we've been discussing till now, then the buyer can even do these four things in that place. Says the Mishna Berura Nun Vav, V'im B'charu Shiva Tovei Ha'ir, Hatam, the reason is, Da'oz Poka HaKadusha Me'al Makom Ahu L'Gamri. If you sell it to the Zayin Tovei Ha'ir, the Kedusha of the place goes off totally. V'ayin b'Pri Megadim, the Mistapek, look at the Pri Megadim who is in doubt, the Efsher de Bo'ina Dafka Keshehisnu Behedya Be'isa Mechira. Maybe it's possible that we really need at the time of the sale, they made a stipulation, V'hirshu la Lokeach al Zeh, and they allowed the Lokeach to do one of these four things. Sivkota Nun Zayin Yasa HaLokeach, We said again, the Zayin Tuva Ir, B'maimed Anshe Ir, the Lokeh could do whatever he wants, even these four things. Says the Mishna Berura, V'hu Adin Sha'yidei Shiva Tovi Ha'ir, B'maimed Anshe Ir, Mutter Lahotzi Hadomim L'chol Ma She'yirtzu Afilu L'dvar Chol. Like we've seen already many times, the main thing that everybody agrees to is that if the sale was done by the Zayin Tuva Ir, B'maimed Anshe Ir, the money that's received could be used for anything. It doesn't have to go up in Kedusha. It could even be used for Chulin, as long as it's some kind of tzarech of the tzibur. So that's the Mishna Berura adds on over here. Not only can the buyer of the shul use the makom of the shul for even one of these places as a makom bizayom, the money that's received for the shul also could be used for whatever you want. But if you look in the Shar Tzir and Os Nun Vav, he says this din of the mechaber is not really so pashut. The af harayvid the polig Rambam the masha matir adal dvarim modabazeh. Even the Ravid who argues with the Rambam and says just because it was sold by the Zayin Tuva Ir b'maimed Anshe Ir, that doesn't give you a right to make the makom of the Bais Haknesses into one of those four places as a makom bizayom. But even that Ravid who argues with the Rambam lagabe the makom, he's masking lagabe the money that you receive, that it loses its kedusha and you can use it even for chulin purposes. And the last Mishna Berura that we'll see for tonight said Kodan Ulches Afilu Elu Ha'arba Dvarim. Again, the Mechaber said if it's the Zayin Tuva Ir that did the sale b'maimed Anshe Ir, then the buyer could even use the makom of the Bais Haknesses for even these four things. Ayin be'ber halacha the din zelo brira. Look in the be'ber halacha that this din is not so pashut. We just mentioned that the Ravid even argues on it. Ulachatchila bevadai tzarach lizar bazeh. Certainly ulachatchila, for sure one should be careful about this, that if a shul is bought, even if it's through the Zayin Tuva Ir, b'maimed Anshe Ir, l'chatchila, it certainly should not be used afterwards to make that place into a Beis Hakisei, or Beis HaMerchatz, a Bursaki, or a Beis Tfila. We'll stop here and continue with Mitzvah Shem in the next year with Sif Yud.